Welcome to Cinema Bites, your go-to for movie recaps in a flash. Big twists, epic moments, all in just minutes. The movie starts at 8 in the morning in a forest reserve called R4 National Park. A forest ranger named Benjamin Fanny was at his post when his supervisor started the morning round on the walkie-talkie, checking everyone's locations. When it was Benjamin's turn, the supervisor called several times, but there was no response from him, and it seemed like he was overwhelmed at work. He stuck a note on the announcement board at his station with a very strange sentence written on it: "I owe this land a body." After that, we meet the young woman Lennon, as she heads to her new job as a forest ranger. On the walkie-talkie, someone brings up the recent wave of disappearances in the gardens and reserves in that area. Lennon stops the car to get a tissue, and when she leans back in her seat, she finds an animal standing in the middle of the road staring at her. She freezes in place for a moment from its gaze, then the walkie-talkie suddenly makes a loud screeching sound that startles her and snaps her out of her daze. Now the road is empty again, and the animal has disappeared in the blink of an eye, just as it appeared. At the ranger station, Lennon overhears two of her colleagues mocking the matter of her appointment when Ranger Jackson introduces her to them. The two act dumb as if nothing happened and slip away. Jackson congratulates Lennon on her new position and comments on the rumors that she's been trying to get this job for years. She brushes him off, but remains distant from everyone, only answering questions briefly each time. In the first briefing, Trainer Janong warns them that there are no mobile network towers in the reserve, and some areas don't even have electricity. But Lennon seems more interested in the missing persons posters, one of which is about Benjamin Fanny. The news of Lennon's new job also pleased two of her acquaintances, Harold and Margaret Finley, despite their old age. They said they were planning to go camping soon because Harold had a knee surgery and his doctor finally allowed him such an adventure. Finally, it was time for Lennon to take over one of the stations, and it turned out to be Benjamin's old post. The ominous note was still stuck there. With satisfaction, Lennon pulled off the tape covering it. The ranger's facilities were basic, but it was all she needed. Lennon quickly started organizing her things in the place and made sure to secure her weapon very well. But when she spread a map on the wall, we discovered her real goal. She's investigating the mysterious disappearances. It seems she has personal motives, as she also pinned a photo of herself with her family on the map. As she lay on the bed, she noticed that the previous rangers had left their marks on the wooden desk, and we see that one of the names was Fanny. At 8 o'clock, the morning round called Station 114, and Lennon immediately responded, telling them she was going on patrol in the Black Mountain area. A note on the announcement board warned that the ranger at this station would be away for 3 days and asked that no one steal his supplies, as that was all he had to last the summer. After that, Lennon began her journey, listening to the same radio program discussing the forest mystery. They say there are rumors that the disappearances happen near the granite fields, and the highest number of cases are in Arvarez National Park, which also holds the record for the number of cases each year. Most of the victims are children. Among the strange details of this phenomenon is that the bodies often appear without shoes, and there are places where rescue teams had already searched before. Lennon spent the day listening to these reports, then camped in the forest at night and continued her way early the next morning. During the morning round, she tried to respond when they called Station 114, but the walkie-talkie started screeching, and she realized she had forgotten to bring extra batteries to replace them. There was nothing she could do, so she continued exploring the area all day. It was completely dark when Lennon started to hear footsteps around her. The flashlight beams shone on the same animal she saw on the road. Suddenly, a very loud scream came from the walkie-talkie, but she couldn't understand anything or respond. Only then did she remember she hadn't changed the batteries, so the device couldn't possibly be working. Hearing the footsteps get closer, she raised the lantern and saw that it was Ranger Jackson. He told her he was worried when she didn't respond in the morning and offered her his spare walkie-talkie battery and also invited her to share a meal under the moonlight. During the conversation, he tried to get her to open up, wanting to know more about her, but Lennon didn't give him a chance because she knew people thought she was crazy. Jackson changed the subject, saying that every isolated forest ranger gets a bit crazy, and asked if she was sleeping well since many suffer from insomnia in this job. They camped next to each other to sleep, and in the morning Jackson again offered her his spare radio battery, saying these devices are old and unreliable, but it's safest to have a working one. Then each went their own way, and Lennon returned to her shelter, exhausted to the point that she fell asleep as soon as she lay down. In a mix between memory and dream, she saw herself playing with a little girl under a very tall tree, until a woman's hurried voice asked her, "Where's your sister?" That ended the dream, and she woke up sighing in frustration, as if this wasn't the first time she had that dream. That night, she marked the Black Mountain on the map and set off for the next area the following day, doing everything the same way as before, covering different corners of the reserve and always marking on the map the parts she had already visited. But it seemed she never found what she was looking for. The disturbing dream never left her. Always the same tree, the same little girl, until one day, exhausted from another fruitless exploration, she turned off the light in the shelter and went to sleep. After a few hours, a thin shadow appeared on the wall, revealing stealthy movements of someone outside. Lennon didn't see it. She woke up feeling that something was wrong and turned on the light. Suddenly, someone started banging hard on the door and a man's voice was calling for help. Lennon asked him what happened, but he didn't answer, his voice becoming more panicked, as if someone else was with him, begging her to open the door as quickly as possible. Knowing this was part of her job, she had no choice but to help. In the end, she opened the door. The man was completely terrified, grabbing her arm and saying there was no time to waste. She explained she at least needed to put on her shoes before helping him, and convinced him to let go of her arm. But that seemed to shatter his hopes, and he began crying, backing away quickly. Feeling for his state, she ran after him barefoot and reported the incident to the control center. A little later, she was startled by the man's scream as he called for a woman named Sarah, and she ran toward the sound. Finally, she caught up with the unknown man, who was collapsing in tears, telling Lennon that his companion had been here. Exactly. But now, no one can find her. The next morning, a search team was already at the site. Jinang clarified that the missing girl's name was Sarah Greenberg. The garden was divided into squares, and each person would search in a certain area. But Jackson didn't let Lennon join the team. He said someone had to stay at the shelter in case she showed up alone, even though he knew it was unlikely. Lennon herself said the girl would have appeared if she was around, because she wouldn't have been able to ignore the helicopter. Jackson didn't listen to her arguments and insisted on his decision. But Lennon decided to disobey the orders, and after a while she left another note on the board with the same previous warning, and an extra message for Sarah Greenberg in case she actually searched that spot during the search. Lennon is struck by a traumatic childhood memory when her sister Jenny got lost in the forest and was never found. The memory was so vivid that Lennon accidentally screamed Jenny's name once instead of calling for Sarah. After searching for the girl all day, she found a piece of cloth that was torn and stained. A few meters later, she saw someone standing in the woods with their back to Lennon, arms outstretched in front. Lennon approached and realized it was Sarah Greenberg, very dizzy and covered in wounds. She was looking down, mumbling nonsense, but seemed to snap out of it when she heard her name, then asked if Lennon was a real person. Even though she found Sarah, Lennon didn't escape punishment for disobeying Jackson's orders. Jinang fired her from her job at the reserve and told her to stay at her post, with no more exploration trips until the end of the week when the helicopter would come to pick her up. Lennon had to accept the decision, but felt it was unfair, and barely managed to hide her anger. Since she lost her job anyway, she decided to break Jinang's rules as soon as her leg healed. But instead of exploring the remaining areas on the map for the first time, she went back to the same path where she found Sarah. Even as she searched every rock along the way, she found nothing worthwhile, and the piece of cloth was no longer there. In the middle of the night, the radio suddenly started crackling, and Lennon turned it off again, thinking it was faulty. She couldn't sleep, so she left the tent with her flashlight and saw something moving quickly among the leaves a few meters away. As she tried to see what it was, she approached and asked who was there, shining her flashlight and seeing something moving quickly among the leaves a few meters away. As she tried to see what it was, she approached and asked who was there. When no one answered, she kept searching around her and heard heavy breathing nearby. Suddenly, she glimpsed what looked like a person crawling in the low trees, going to hide behind her tent. Lennon identified herself as a forest ranger, saying she could help if there was a problem. But when she went around the tent, there was no one there. The breathing started mixing with the rustling of the leaves intensely, as if something was coming in that direction. Lennon got scared and went back inside the tent, trying to listen to what was happening outside. A huge shadow suddenly appeared right next to her, stretching long fingers towards the tent. She grabbed her gun and warned that she was armed. The thing paused for another moment, then walked heavily toward the tent. She grabbed her gun and warned that she was armed, and the thing paused for another moment, then walked heavily. Suddenly, Jackson called her name on the radio, telling her that someone was lost nearby and needed help from all the forest rangers. Without realizing that Jackson didn't even know where she was, since the agreement was for her to stay at the shelter as punishment, she replied that that person had just passed by her. Then, the radio started crackling strangely again, switching between static and Jackson's voice, but she managed to hear him telling her to go look for that person. Lennon listened and stayed in contact with Jackson, until suddenly she found herself at the edge of a lake. This lake was on the other side of the garden, miles away from where she had been a minute ago, and she didn't understand how she got there. She tried to explain the situation to Jackson and got even more confused by his response. Jackson said she was exactly where she was supposed to be, then recited the forest ranger's motto: "Leave nothing behind, take nothing with you, and let nothing die." Lennon's skin crawled when she realized that the voice might not be Jackson's at all, and she hurried back to the tent, but stumbled when she heard Jenny's voice on the radio. After another dream about the past, she woke up dizzy and saw she was still at the lake. Through the radio, Jackson's voice recited the motto again, and accused Lennon of taking something from its place. She didn't see the person climbing down from the tree behind her, but she heard something and went there. She found blood on the tree trunk, and suddenly Sarah appeared in front of her, just as she was when she was found, and asked again if Lennon was a real person. Lennon started to break down, curling up on the ground, covering her face with her hands. Jenny appeared for a brief moment and whispered a hint in her ear, telling her she had to return what she stole to the forest. Lennon left the radio behind and kept walking until she heard two people talking and felt relieved when she saw it was the Finley family camping. But unfortunately, they couldn't see or hear her, as if she were a ghost. Worse still, a copy of Lennon appeared right after and shot Margaret. Lennon ran quickly and passed through an area full of missing person posters, including Jenny's, but again she bumped into the Finley family on the other side, and this time, Harold was eating his wife's entrails. No matter how much she ran from them, both kept appearing again, repeating variations of the same conversation until she couldn't take it anymore and pointed her gun at Margaret. She finally understood that the forest demanded a sacrifice to make up for her mistake in saving Sarah, because it turned out Sarah was the thing she took from its place. She couldn't pull the trigger, so she let the Finley family go in peace. Then the radio came on again. Jackson's voice warned her that she had to pull the trigger, so she let the Finley family go in peace. Then the radio came on again. Jackson's voice warned her she had to return what she took and told her to take Sarah's place, and that she'd never go home again. Lennon replied that she preferred that choice, and the radio suddenly went silent. She returned to the lake and found a map buried in the sand, with nonsensical instructions, but she decided to follow them, and found herself back at her post. There, she discovered Jenny's shoe, hung it around her waist, and passed through the door, and unbelievably, entered the house where she spent her childhood, not far from the reserve. She remembered the last day Jenny disappeared, when the two were playing together and Lennon lost sight of her. Then she saw an old radio, and heard the conversation between Jinang and Jackson on the day Jenny disappeared. Jinang even found her, but told Jackson the girl wasn't lost. The forest took her. As she moved into the other rooms, Lennon's house started to transform, forcing her to follow a certain path and face several horrors. She saw her mother's despair, a depressing funeral, and her father also killed himself. When the lights went out and a terrifying shadow appeared, Jenny's voice guided her sister to their room, which was filled with water. Lennon asked for forgiveness, and she swore that she never stopped looking for her. But the girl said it wasn't her fault, and after Jenny suddenly disappeared, Lennon left that case and went face to face with Fanny, who was yelling. That ghost passed by as well. Then Jinang appeared in front of her. Lennon realized this wasn't just a vision, and asked the coach if she was a real person. Jinang, affected, said yes, and started to explain the truth to Lennon. She told her that several forest rangers knew the forest takes certain people, and there's nothing to be done about it, because nothing can be taken from its place. Yet she regretted leaving Jenny, and said she'd abandoned many people over the years, and she was tired of it all. Jinang confirmed she wouldn't allow the same thing to happen to Lennon, and promised she would take her place, saying this young woman would become a great forest ranger. Then many hands grabbed Lennon by the shoulder and pushed her down. She appeared in the middle of the lake and saw Jenny on the shore for a moment, but it turned out to be Jackson who was really there this time. The real Jackson pulled her out of the water and called for help on the radio, warning that Ranger Station 114 was missing Lennon. She asked him how he knew she was just missing and not taken, and although he didn't answer, he wasn't surprised by the question, and Lennon understood that Jinang had told him everything. The following summer, she returned to the park, and this time Jackson was the one leading the briefing sessions, since Jinang was missing. She really did take Sarah's place so Lennon wouldn't be taken, and could keep her job in the Forest Service. And while she was still at Station 114, she arranged her things the same way as before and hung up the same map. This time, it had stickers for both Jenny and Sarah. At night, she left her own mark on the desk and claimed this spot for herself once and for all. After some time, she was camping when Jackson called everyone on the radio, announcing that there was a boy lost near the lake. Lennon was nearby and responded to the call, saying she could help with the search. At team base, copies of the boy's file were handed out, and his name was James Moore. Lennon took the coverage area and started searching, calling his name. After a while, she saw someone standing with his back to her, mumbling something. When he turned, she recognized James's face and grabbed the radio to report she'd found him. But then he asked if Lennon was a real person. She saw that he was one of the forest's chosen, like Jenny and Sarah, so she replied that she wasn't a real person. The boy turned away again, looking hopeless, and Lennon put down the radio without reporting and walked away. And that's the end of the movie. See you in another summer.